Okay, guys, we are going to be looking at George Bush's administration, George Herbert Walker Bush. And he is Reagan's vice president, and he's going to serve one term, and we're going to talk about why that was one term. And then I'll start Bill Clinton on a different PowerPoint. Okay, so there we go. We know that in the Reagan administration, he's going to escalate the Cold War. We know that he did Star Wars, and he said that he was going to basically push the Soviet Union to end the Cold War. But communism around the world is kind of crippling. In China, in Tiananmen Square, we see that the Chinese students are having a demonstration, and this demonstration is asking for more democracy in China. And one of the things that happens is that this demonstration is going on, and this guy, they call him Tank Man. If you haven't seen Tank Man's video, go watch it. I think if you had me in world history, we watched Tank Man and how they were allowed to have the demonstration, and then the army comes out. And Tank Man gets in between the tanks and the protesters to stop them. And it's kind of scary what goes on. So please, if you have time, go watch Tank Man. Just know that this guy's very brave. I wish I had his strength. Hey, one of the other things that y'all had on your interview was the fall of the Berlin Wall. And we're seeing slowly that the Soviet Union is allowing people, which we saw in Gorbachev's administration, that perestroika and glasnost, the openness and the restructuring the economy and moving it away from the government controlling everything, that kind of started revolutions in these smaller countries that were tied to the Soviet Union and their bloc. And slowly they start to liberate themselves. And Gorbachev is out and Yeltsin comes in, and we see that the Soviet Union slowly falls apart and deteriorates, and we will have the end of the Cold War. One of the other things that occurs in this time period is the Persian Gulf War. It is a war that is within less than a year done. But what occurred is Saddam Hussein, he's in dire need of money, and he invades Kuwait. Kuwait is a very oil-rich country. He invades Kuwait to be able to take over the oil fields. Again, the U.S. is very highly tied to this area in oil. And so what the U.S. does is they do Operation Desert Shield, where they're going to shield Kuwait from the onslaught of the Iraqi invasion. The next thing that occurs is Operation Desert Storm, and this is when the U.S. military sends out its Navy, and they're going to just keep on sending the jets to basically storm bases of operations in Iraq to prevent Kuwait, because Kuwait is oil rich. We are dependent on it. Again, the U.S. gets involved because just like we've gotten involved every single time in the Middle East, it's because of oil. And the Persian War Gulf War is one of the highlights of the Bush administration. But there is domestic issues at home. You already know the first one, the American Disabilities Act. Y'all had it on your interview that Bush is creating more equal access to places. Also employment opportunities, because a lot of people who were handicapped were not seen as employable, and they're always looked at that their handicap would be impediment on their job, and this prevents the discrimination of them. You also know that it creates the preferential parking. It also created the ramps. It also created handles going downstairs. There's just a lot that came with the American Disabilities Act. So that was a positive for the Bush administration. But one negative was the appointment of Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is going to be an appointment for the Supreme Court. And y'all know, as Supreme Court justices are being appointed, the Senate has hearings. And I don't know if y'all seen the Brett Kavanaugh one, which was last year. There was a lot of things brought up about Brett Kavanaugh's background. And the same thing with Clarence Thomas. They're vetting him. They're looking at stuff in his history. And one of the things that came up, just like we saw with Brett Kavanaugh, is that he had some issues when he was a professor in Oklahoma, that another law professor, Anita Hill, had charged him with sexual harassment, but no one was listening. And there had been some things that had occurred that she had escalated to upper management that was unbecoming. And so when his appointment came about, they brought up Anita Hill, saying that how can someone be put on the court that had issues with treating people equally and having good discourse with colleagues. Despite this, he will get appointed to the Supreme Court. One of the things that Bush promised in his administration, and there's that little quote there, is read my lips, no new taxes. But we do have an economic downturn, and he does have to increase taxes. Okay, so this was also on our interview. Bush has had an economic downturn, and it's really hard to gain anything out of an administration when the economy is going bad. And so the 1992 election had 3 people running. It had Bush, he's the incumbent. It had this guy right here, Ross Perot. And then it had another guy, Bill Clinton, who's the governor of Arkansas. Ross Perot ran for the Reform Party, and that often took votes away from Bush. Looking at them here, it's just like, there was a question that was actually asked. And the question was, how are you going to fix the economy? And look at Bush, he's looking at his watch, not in tune to the town meeting. There's Ross Perot saying, oh my gosh, I'm a millionaire. I guess I need to pull out my notes on how to deal with this challenge. And there's Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has actually dealt with problems in Arkansas, and he's actually not had an economic downturn. He's revitalized the economy, and he's responding to the person in the town hall saying, look, this is what we did. Clinton looks like an outsider from Washington. He doesn't look like old money, rich money. And so they realized that Clinton looked like an average Joe. And so the Bush administration, his campaign committee even tries to get him to look like an average Joe. They try to make him go out and do things that traditional people were doing. Go to the store, go buy groceries. And the one time that they got him on TV is they were introducing a new thing called the scanner. And they put an apron on him. They're like, Mr. Bush, would you like to scan this? And he was like, okay. And he goes up there. He doesn't know how to use it, and it actually makes him look like he's out of touch with reality. And so Perot and Bush trying to get into touch with the people who are suffering, really, because of their millions, they're not able to understand that. And so Clinton, seen as an outsider, he seemed like he's fixed up in Arkansas. And so here's the electoral vote. We see Bill Clinton gets 370, okay? And he wins the election. Okay, I'm going to stop it there, and we're going to start with Bill Clinton tomorrow.